Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for that video, Angela. It will be a great session. It will be an hour-long session. If you have any questions, because we really care about your engagement, please let us know. You can speak, and also you can use the chat box and ask any question that you would like. So today our guest speaker is Ibrahim Bahati. Ibrahim, are you here with us? And hopefully you can hear us.
Yes. Hi, I'm here. I hope now it's better a little bit.
Yeah, Ibrahim was literally traveling from South Africa to Uganda. So he literally landed like a few hours ago. So thank you so much, Ibrahim, for joining us. I would like to give you the mic, and can you please tell us more about yourself and what you do, and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Ibrahim Bahati, and I was one of the cohorts with Ubah at American University of Beirut, but right now I'm a senior research fellow at the Human Sciences Research Council, and we are looking at challenges to work, the African youth livelihoods, and most looking at the structural barriers to work. And we'll be documenting Uganda. So sometimes I'm going to be looking at mental health and how it's been affecting, these structural barriers. But also I'm passionate about the decolonization of knowledge, African history. And mostly if you look at my Instagram, that is just really what it's all about. That's a little bit about me, but with some background also in gender studies, in understanding behavior change between men and women, and also interested in conflict. So I have a lot of interest.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I literally assume that everyone knows me, so I even forget to introduce myself. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Ubah. I'm from Somaliland. Ibrahim and I went to the same uni a few years ago. So what I'm passionate about women's rights. I'm also passionate about, the development of the African continent and decolonizing and the history of the continent. I just finished my master's. I studied international conflict and cooperation, and I'm also a Baobab fellow, so that's why I'm doing this event. But also I write a lot of blogs about my journey, and also my view of the whole continent, and what I look forward in the future. So thank you so much for coming. And today we are speaking an important topic, and I think a lot of you who are here always think about the future of the African continent and the concept of brain drain. Why there's a brain drain in the continent, and why a lot of African youth prefer to leave the continent and go elsewhere to look for a better life. And I invited Ibrahim because Ibrahim, I think he has been to a lot of countries, and he worked with a lot of youth, and he knows that feeling of leaving home and looking for a better life. So Ibrahim, I would like to ask you some questions, and also for our audience, if they have any questions, that you can also DM us through the chat box. But I would like you please explain to us what brain drain is. What are the root causes of brain drain? And why do we have this issue in many African countries? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Just a disclaimer, I am near the road, and there's a lot happening in my background. So please bear with me. I'm just trying to get into understanding this environment. So really, brain drain is just simple. It's just it has actually become rebuked as a word to mean if we should actually be talking about brain drain, not brain migration. But this is just where mostly young, talented, skilled Africans leave their home countries, and in this particular perspective, they just leave African countries, and then they develop to just go abroad in Europe, or in America, or in Canada, or in these so-called Eurocentric countries. So with the nudge to be able to build a better life, but also they're appetizing better pay, standards of living. And there are various reasons for the cause of brain drain. Some of them, most are economical, but also others are political. Economical in a sense that, of course, definitely people are going to look for greener pastures abroad. They're looking for better life, standards of living, the living which is far much better than the one they've been exposed to in their home countries. And also there is the issue of better money, like the US currency or the euro, the pound is far much better than most of our own currencies. So people have an urge to be like, if I just can be able to get that lump sum of money, then it will be very easier and possible. But then there is also a political stance to it. And this is just something which is revolving around research. When you tend to see in organized migrant workers and so-called brain drain in what, like, when it's talking about, let's say, the maids in the Middle East, who are loaded in these airlines, Ethiopian Airlines, Emirates, and all that, and that has an arm of the state, and you find that these are organizations which are politically linked, and they are leading to this. And one politician, whom I'm not going to mention his name, but it was in Uganda, he's actually said that is good for Uganda. That is what he claimed. He just put it on BBC Time, I think, BBC. Science in Africa, I think, and in Macquarie University say that was really good for Uganda to just be able to engage into that. So you can see that there is also a political element of saying that people should actually go out and work. But I also think there is another phase which is happening in brain drain, and I think we just do not talk about it really much, is where young people, and I want to put this one out there, is that the most brain drain that we think is depression, most people are not actually. Yes, yeah. So I don't know where, if you had just got it. So what I was trying to say, that there is also another narrative of like really what the brain drain that is happening is just like in nuances of where it's within Africa itself. It's happening within rural, from rural to urban areas. So I think we need also to get that nuance of how brain drain is. And then maybe lastly, we need to talk about the negative publicity, of course, about the African continent. Sometimes also the opportunities it has. So yeah, I'll just be addressing those somehow as we move along. Yeah.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Actually, like before I was doing a research on this topic a few weeks ago, and I was looking at the case of Uganda, for example, and I found out actually the doctor-patient ratio in Uganda is 1 to 24,000 per doctor, and that's like, I was shocked actually, and not only in Uganda but also in Nigeria, and a lot of those qualified doctors are going to the US and Canada and the UK. So it's literally something that we need to talk about. But I wanted to go back to the political stance of what you have mentioned, and you said some African leaders are normalizing this. But do you think there are some who are actually doing something regarding brain drain, or like they are just, it became normal?
Yeah, I think mostly we are seeing some African countries take to. We were in a conference, I think, a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the relationship between the academia and the higher education and the community, saying that they have to really be keeping in contact. Like, what are we teaching our children? Like, is it skill based? Because so far as we understand, your undergraduate is not your own. It's for, let's say, to please your parent. It is for you to become better in society. So it's not aiming at building certainly a skill. I would tell you that part of what I got my master's is one which I feel like it has been relevant, because I can be able to apply that knowledge and skills. But my undergrad, most of the things that I learned were not as applicable. So definitely there is an enticing new mechanisms to be able to retain their workforce. I think a little bit of Ghana is doing that. Tanzania has been doing that.
So I think I will come back to you, Ibrahim, and I think many of our maybe audience, they could also relate. Sometimes, like especially when you are from a country that there is job scarcity, it's very hard sometimes, especially like when you go to the West, to come back to that country and look for jobs, because always you have that limitations. Will I find a job? And I think many of the African students, when they go abroad and when they try to look like get a job that actually can pay them well, or at least could respect what they have studied, it's always hard to like come back home and like get what you want. So a lot of those students, they prefer to stay the US or like those Western countries. And I agree with Ibrahim, what Ibrahim said, because I think education plays an important role on how especially when you study in the West, you know, you have this perspective that, you know, in the education setting, that you are always better than, it's always better for you to stay in these countries, because, you know, you can find a good job, a job that could pay you well, and then maybe go back home in the future and invest in, you know, your country. And so for me, like actually, I struggled with brain drain, because I remember when I finished my undergrad, I went back home and I was looking for a job. And I literally went to so many places, submit my CV, talk to a lot of people, and I couldn't find anything. Because I remember me like literally applying 15 jobs like in every week, but I could not find anything. Like there's no even response. They will not even reject you. You don't even hear anything. And of course, it's like there's so much nepotism, there's so much corruption, there's, you know, you should have some connections, and I didn't have any of those things. So it was just me carrying my CV and my grades and going literally around, and I could not find anything. And I was so disappointed at the end, because it was so hard for me. I felt, you know, I liked my country and I still like my country, but like you expect more. But I think you have these expectations when you go and see your classmates, you know, enjoying their country, looking for jobs and getting jobs immediately. And when you go back to your country and you don't find the same experience, I feel like you feel disappointed and you feel like, okay, I need to look for something else. I need to look for a greener pasture somewhere else. And I think that's the brain drain that, you know, we need to like focus on. And I think our leaders, especially if they want to focus on their countries and the development of their countries, they need to invest the youth, and they need to retain a human capital within the country. Sometimes, of course, a lot of our countries are struggling. Maybe there's no even peace. There's so much going on. But I think making sure that your youth feel safe to be in that country and they feel that their voice is being heard is very important as well. And so, yeah, I don't know if Ibrahim is back yet. Ibrahim, are you here? Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to add on to what you said, because, and I think this is where we need to get real, maybe with because what sometimes happens is that there are challenges to once you go abroad, or what. I remember we were in the Baobab summit, and one scholar said they were advised that once you go abroad, do not come back, but this is their own society. And then the scholar asked, how do you come back to a society? And that was like a really awakening situation. So definitely there is an issue of wanting to come back, and then when you come back, then there is that negative pushback. Then you come back, and then also the systems of nepotism, which you're talking about, the systems of pushback, the systems of patriarchy, the systems of old people within the institutions, on the public institutions, who don't want to change anything. And once you looked at that, you looked at as a threat. Young folks really think that I think they just need to move on with their own lives and make life where they're appreciated. So I think that is also where we need to say that maybe brain drain needs to be talked from a context perspective, because without understanding the context, we can never know the nuances of why it is happening, what is leading to young people taking some course of actions and something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ibrahim. I think also it goes back to the education and how what we learn in school. I remember like one time I was in Rwanda, and one person asked us name an African scientist. We could not name an African scientist, literally. And because of mainly like the education we received, they don't shed light on African talents. They don't shed light on, what Africans actually could do in different fields. So that's why, because, whenever you're studying something or reading something, it's very important that you critically analyze who wrote this, why did they wrote this, what's the message? Because I feel like we don't see the talents within the African people, and we always underestimate what they could do. So that's why, we always look for a greener pasture somewhere else, while mainly those people who are in those countries, most of them came from the African continent, but of course they were being naturalized and now like they have another citizenship. But that migration and brain drain and losing our talents, it's a huge issue, and I think we need to address it, especially when it comes to the education. And we need research centers, Ibrahim. I think research centers is an instrumental to decolonize Africa's education, because we don't have research centers that do research on, the African communities, the African countries, their struggles, their education, their curriculum. Because in some countries, the curriculum that they are using up to date are the curriculums established by their colonizers, and which is like you still see how can we fight against brain drain if our curriculum is like that, if it was designed in a way to make sure the best of the best could at the end of the day leave their countries and look for and go to another place. Yeah, so Ibrahim, I wanted to ask you the question about, we always see the best of the best going to the West, but what's the role of the West? Like, what's like, because I know there are a lot of immigration rules and stuff like that, but what's their concern? Like, are they actually concerned about brain drain, or they still want to take more from the African continent?
Yes, so I've changed places, though it's a little bit noisy, but I hope this is better. So I mean, the role of the what is just like, first of all, there is more concern about retaining that human capital more than anything else, because what you see, for instance, is cases of, let's say, like the green cards. Britain has been introducing a little bit of where you see that the PhDs being retained in the economy. So you're seeing a lot of stuff that is just actually happening, of where it is just enticing most of the most talented, the green visa cards, the euros, and all that. So it's about doing that and retaining the best, but also while we're talking about the negative publicity about Africa, where of course there is retaining Africa's best and then continuing to perpetuate the one single-sided story of poverty, hunger, dark continent without history. And that really propels this internalized hatred towards our own selves and our own communities, that we always look towards the West for just achieving success. And yeah, so by the time someone just reaches, we don't hear these nuanced stories of where someone is 18, reaches 18 years old, for instance, in the West. is that they are kicked out of the house. They have to pay for school bills. I mean, they have to start contributing, or there is poverty in the US. We don't hear about this, so we don't know about these operations that are going. And when you look into the brain drain that is actually happening in Africa, already what I've put into the chat, the index, is that look at all of them. If Somalia is just also among the leading, look at all of them. Most of them have had conflict. Most of them have had Western influence. Oh, so definitely there was a lot of that also plays into the picture. Yeah.
Thank you, Ibrahim. I think some of you actually commented on this issue. I see a comment about Nigeria. I think like even here in the UK, I see a lot of Nigerian students. I see a lot of people from Nigeria. And that's true. I think Nigeria is one of the countries that not critically facing brain drain. And that's true. Even the bank has been literally hijacked because, the IT staff, the qualified people left at the end of the day. And you see how sad that could be. A whole country, because Nigeria is one of the strongest countries in Africa, but still, because when people that you rely on leave, I mean, at the end of the day, you are no different from any other country that's struggling at the end of the day. And Tech also talk about Somalia and how there's a shift when it comes to brain drain, and he said he used the brain circulation, and that's true. There are a lot of educated people who are coming back to Somalia and who are doing a lot of stuff in the country, but also it's very important to highlight the fact that a lot of the locals within that region also feel like that they have to migrate to have that better lifestyle. So of course, at the end of the day, these people who are coming back, they're doing a lot for the country, but also at the end of the day, they can leave anytime if something happens. But for the locals, they have maybe a different perspective. So it's very also important to highlight, when it comes to the diaspora, what's their message on brain drain, and brain circulation. But that's a good point. Yeah, because a lot of people are actually doing a lot of good things for Somalia. Yeah. And Ibrahim, I wanted to ask you about the role of the African Union. Do you think they have initiatives that controlled the number of youth, qualified, skilled workers that leave from the continent, or there are no such policies?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree to that. And once we are looking, I think one of the things which is happening right now, there is a new agenda which is being promoted called the Youth Peace and Security, and the youth are now organizing and championing peace talks. And so there is kind of the East African Youth Camp, there is the Southwest, the Northern, and so all of those are galvanizing to be able to have the youth really take into peace processes around the continent. And they realize there is a realization that the youth are defranchised. For instance, they have to go into a process of waithood, accessing resources. And I know for sure there's some kind of cases in South Africa where some youth are trying to use music to restore their culture, and they're doing research in terms of restoring the memory and the traditional art. So there is that, and I think it's being championed really greatly. There has been a lot of talks that have been ongoing, mostly with the Youth and Peace and Security Agenda, which is promoting, I think, the Africa we want for 2063. So that is something to be able to look out for. And of course, there is, the African Union is also trying to fight borders, so that there is this kind of of course, there is a voluntary borders, it's voluntary, but trying to say that there should be pacts and free movement and economic power. So that is really, which is great. Though what we'll be able to say is that I think it's lacked that Pan-African spirit that we saw what the Nkurumas, the Sankaras, and all this just envisioned. And I was so shocked to be able to learn that one of the buildings which the African Union said is just owned by Chinese. So that means that it's under mass surveillance. So that is kind of like a great lesson to be able to learn. There is more which is needed in terms of really building Pan-Africanism and just instilling that sense of African pride and identity and culture, and also in getting in touch with both on the continent and in the diasporas for people to be able to come together. Yeah.
And thank you, Ibrahim. I think also it's very important to shed light on when it comes to brain drain. A lot of these African youth might not even go to the West, but also they also move within the continent, because I know, for example, South Africa, there are a lot of Zimbabweans that go to South Africa. There are a lot of Nigerians that go to South Africa. So you see, even like, the movement within the continent also became a common thing, because at the end of the day, people want to go to places where they feel like that they could get something, and they could like earn extra penny to survive. It's all about survival. But I wanted to ask you, Ibrahim, one of the last questions, and if you have any questions, please, and you want to speak, raise your hand. We would love to hear your voices. And also, if you don't want to speak and you don't feel comfortable, please use the chat box and send any questions you would like to ask. But Ibrahim, what are some of the viable solutions that we could come up to at least reduce this national brain drain dilemma that's happening in many African countries? I think someone raised their hand. Natrinda, yeah, Emmanuel, yeah, you can speak.
All right, thank you so much for this session, Ubah and Abraham. I was actually going to pose the question you posed to Abraham, then I also had a contribution to make. So I was going to pose actually the exact same question, but my contribution is, now that some of you have had an opportunity to travel outside Africa, you have seen how the systems works in different sectors, let it be agriculture, healthcare, business. At least you have things that that are very essential that we can bring back home and implement. And what I think the problem in Africa is policy. We have policies which don't really support people to come and implement some of the proposals that they want to implement. And I think one of the best solutions is that people who are exposed, people who have been privileged to get education, should be able to come back and take part in the policy dialogues, policy formulation in our countries. And if it also means taking part in the politics of our countries, contesting, because the politics of our countries in one way or the other contribute significantly to the welfare. So I think that could be one of the solutions that we can try to avoid the challenges that we have of brain drain. Thank you so much. So I also pose a question on how we can solve such that I can learn from all of you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming. I think you stated a valid point. And I think we have a lot of issues within our countries when it comes to policies, when it comes to the system of governance, when it comes to how people critically analyze the situations. I think we have a lot of issues, but I think it's very important to start from a bottom-up approach, because if we want to leave a legacy, if we want to change something and change, I think someone is not muted. If you can please mute yourself, I'll be nice. I think it would be very important that we need to use the bottom-up approach to make sure, at the end of the day, it's not the West who are coming to save us, it's ourselves that we need to save each other. And our leaders, most of them are like the ones who we should blame. But as the youth, we have the power to change the way we see and feel our continent, because at the end of the day, this is the continent we have, and no one will change for us. It's a continent that we need to make sure we keep it, and we need to invest it, whether the African diaspora or the local communities. And when it comes to education, I think for me, education is the most important thing that we need to deconstruct the way we teach our youth and the way we view, the current history of the continent. Because if you rely on what others write about Africa, that's not the best way to have a change and to start a change. I think, Ibrahim, you're here. Are you here? As I said before, like, feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions. Yeah, Ibrahim, I was
raising my hand. I was raising my hand to kind of like answer that. I think one of the things which I'm excited about is about the young people, the Gen Z, really, because like they are really doing great stuff. Knowledge has been centralized so much in so many ways that the African youth are no longer afraid to tell their stories, to teach their African history. Gosh, I lost you there, but I'm gonna put it in the chat anyway. If you can. Yeah, but
I can hear you now.
Yes, so I was trying to say that most of the Gen Z are not really afraid of just using even social media and to tell their stories and teaching African, history. We saw, for instance, in the Ukraine-Russia crisis, and many took on Twitter, which made some African governments to be able to respond with helping most students really fleeing, So, and many are starting hubs, startups, and they're acting as great agents of change. Of course, definitely we can talk about the MCF program. That is another good one. Another one which I also know is the use of technology. The youth are not just standing by, they're using technology to be able to harness. I know for sure some of one young person who is in South Africa is collaborating with all these farmers to be able to teach them about food security, which is affecting South Africa. But also he's collaborating with farmers who are like in Ghana, who are in Nigeria, and they've never met, and they're trying to solve some of these issues. So definitely we cannot be able to wait some of the political leaders to be able to do most of this stuff. I think it's just gonna be ours to be able to do this. And then the other question, the other important part, why brain drain exists the way it is because I want you all to go and read Decolonization and Afrofeminism by Sylvia Tamale, is that it's within the common law, which we understand as the formal law, is not the functionality of most African societies. People function within informal economies, within informal structures, because those are accessible, those are less bureaucratic. And once we understand how the functionality is, I think that is better, that we need to start going back to the informal structures and how people are navigating, how women, for instance, are accessing resources. What are the education systems like? What is happening on the ground? What language are we speaking? Because most of the time we think we're educated, we go back to implement these policies, but they don't work because they don't speak to the daily language of people. They don't speak to their experiences. So I think we need also come down to the grassroots and understand those contexts really very well.
Absolutely. I think you also mentioned technology. I think technology and Africa being a technological hub could also be a part of the solution, because of the current, how the world became a global village. You can work anywhere, you can be anywhere and still work in many other countries. So I think if we have the technological skills, and if we have if every one of us has the accessibility to log in and work elsewhere, I think that could also connect and interconnect us one way or another, and make sure still our best stays home. And anytime they could, at least, even if you're doing a community work service, or if you are giving back to your community for free, we need their skills and we need them to stay in the continent. So if you have any questions, please, you can raise your hand or you can drop it in the chat box. Please let us know. We have like around 15 minutes So yeah, it's your time to ask questions. You can even share your experience. Have you ever feel like you wanted to migrate or go to the West? You can share your feedback with us as well. Yeah. So don't be shy. Just raise your hand. And thank you so much, Ibrahim.
Yeah, the internet has really been really bad. And I just landed here, so sorry about that. But what I wanted to also add to the solutions, and I think is just what the first one is understanding our histories. No matter how complex or complicated they are, I think it is our duty to unlearn and heal part of the ancestral traumas that we are gripped within. How our histories are, without even understanding our cultures. We are taught about European history. We're not taught about, let's say, Somali history, which had all this time of civilization. We're not taught about how the Greece history actually stole from the Egyptian history, how the Egyptian history was segmented from the Sudanese or the Kush, the Kemet. So we need points of reference for people to be able to dream, to know that it's actually possible. It's actually possible to be able to look at that template, and then definitely using technology as much as possible to be able to connect, because the world is they say if it's not a global village, now it's globalization. And maybe the last one which we have to understand is understanding the gender dynamics. We cannot be in a society and do not understand how gender impacts most of our work. Women used to be they used to be oracles, they used to be these spiritual leaders, they used to actually control you, and everything that we think of decolonization, women have done it. They are mothers, they used to participate in the market during the time of Mansa Musa. But right now, in a time when we feel like we need to develop, and Black women have been holding these spaces for us, and we cannot say that an African man can be able to develop without the African man can be able to develop without an African woman. So understanding this gender dynamics is part of our liberation, and I think we have a lot of jobs to be able to do in terms of leverage. Trying to remove those barriers. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. You spoke well, and I know you're very tired, but you still made it to come. So thank you so much, and we really appreciate all your feedback and all your experience. I would like to, I think James raised his hand.
First of all, thanks, Ubah, for the presentation. Thank you a lot. I would like to say that I am also trying to move away from my current country, but I am trying to move to Addis Ababa, Lagos, or Nairobi. And the reason why I want to do this is that as an entrepreneur, the opportunities are coming to Africa. We have seen the boom of Silicon Valley for a long time. You see that a lot of people actually have been raising money, a lot of investments happening there with the startups scene. And then lately we see the West African startup scene, including Ghana, Nigeria, and India growing a lot. So that is why this is the virgin markets, this is the emerging markets where a lot of investors are coming now. So Africa is the playground for a startup or an entrepreneur. So with that being said, you just have to be in the right place, because not every place can give you the opportunity to grasp investments from investors. Not every government in Africa provides the regulations, other things. So this is not factual for other professionals, because in a survey done by the Eco Workers Foundation in South Africa, that they have the youth survey that they do every year in 2022, maybe about 60%, 60 something percent of all youth in Africa are willing to migrate away from the continent, and then only 32% willing to stay. Most probably the youth in Ghana and Rwanda, I think. So we have to ask ourselves, how did Ghana and Rwanda convince their youth to actually think that the future is bright, so that other African nations can copy this, so that the African can say, how did Rwanda is doing this? How did Rwandans youth are saying we need to stay? You know, could be optimistic about the future. What are they providing them with? And the most reasons they want to leave, according to the survey, is first economic. So the jobs and the job opportunity, education, somewhere. And the third one is safety, apparently, which is also another crucial point we need to discuss. So I am thinking that we need to be doing this and making certain places in Africa like the hubs where youth can actually go, even if your country is maybe Zimbabwe, Somalia, or maybe even Chad. So, and then you think you need to get better opportunities, don't think the UK or the Netherlands, think Rwanda, think Nairobi, think Ghana, for example, or South Africa or Egypt. So then you can actually contribute to your continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James. I totally agree with you, and I liked the two concepts that a lot of people are comparing, Pan-Africanism and brain drain. I think we need to revive the concept of Pan-Africanism, and if the youth wants to, for example, travel, or if anyone wants to travel within the African continent, for some of us it's really hard, because those countries have the strict borderlines, borders are closed, so you have to struggle to actually get into, for example, from Nigeria to, let's say, Kenya, because you need a visa to enter those countries. So we need to find ways that we can have a continent where you can free all around without any restrictions. Of course, that could have an consequences, but I think it's very important to consider that an African leader, especially with the African Union, should do something about that, because someone from the US and the UK could literally go to all of these African countries without any visa restrictions, while you are an African and live in the continent, you don't have the right, or you have very few like you have a lot of restrictions. If I think most of us do have restrictions to even go to Kenya or to even go to Uganda without a visa. So I think, for example, I'm Somali, and I'm from Somaliland, but my country is not recognized. So if I want to travel within the African continent, I have to use mainly my Somalia passport, and that has a lot of consequence itself. So sometimes we are being stereotyped, and let's say if you are from Nigeria, you're also being stereotyped because Nigerians are everywhere. So we have a lot of stereotypes going on within the African continent, while we embrace outsiders when they come to the continent. So we need to get rid of that negativity and stereotypes and the things that are forcing the best we have to live outside of Africa, live and look for a greener path.
Can I add one last thing?
Yeah.
If you are trying to go to an African country, it's much easier to go to the European countries. Even if they are willing to charge you more, ask for a visa, it is doable still, it can happen. You can easily move easier. Okay, not easy. It requires some things, but then it's easier to go to a European country. So the other thing I would like to add is that a lot of youth here, African youth, they discuss things, but then they say the governments. So what can you, me, and the others here, and the other Africans can do is that we need to take things in our hands. We actually just blame governments. And then wherever we discuss, we just think that the governments can do. You look at the French Revolution, it was done by the youth. This democracies they have is built by the youth.
I agree with you, and sorry about that. I totally agree with you. I mean, we have to take an action and we have to do something, but it will take time. But that's what I said from the start. I think using a bottom-up approach is it's feasible, and we can do that because we have to start from ourselves and the way we think, and then we can move forward. And Abdul, you're next.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I think for me, I'm still a student, an undergrad student, but sometimes when you look at the reasons why we lose most of our students, it's as a result of some few things that we don't take serious. For instance, I see most of my senior colleagues who has left Ghana, not because they want to live there, because they want to further their education and they don't have the resources to do it in Ghana. But Ghana doesn't have a scholarship that will retain them here. So most of them, they will end up maybe chasing the scholarships in the US, in the Canadas. And the moment they got there, they realize that, oh, the job opportunities are even there. So even if you complete and you say, oh, let me come back to Ghana and help my country, you are not guaranteed a job. You might come back with your master's or with your PhD and you will still be there without a job. So for us to retain our skilled personnel, we have to look at maybe getting some scholarship facilities that will help students who are able to who have educational, who want to further their education so that they can easily get scholarship to further their education without necessarily going to other countries. And also like jobs, it has been a problem that they've been discussing for long, and that one that I wouldn't want to touch on, and everybody knows it. If there's a job that you know you'll be employed, nobody will want to go to their other countries upon all the stress that you hear people go through in their process and even when they get there. So nobody will want to go there. So that is my take. Right.
Thank you so much, Abdul. And speaking of scholarships, I was a MasterCard scholar before, and I think MasterCard, especially when the pandemic happened, with MasterCard Foundation, because they give a lot of scholarships to the students from sub-Saharan African countries, what they have realized is that students who study in the African continent, who do actually have scholarships, MasterCard scholarships, when they were not able, for example, to get access to internet when the pandemic happened. So what they have realized is they actually, instead of spending so much money, for example, sending someone from, let's say, from Nigeria to the US, they realized they need to invest more the universities in the continent. So for example, Makerere, because if the students in Makerere are not able to have internet and they cannot get access to study to do their studies online, they realized they had to do something, and they should, if something happens in the future, students within the African continent could actually leverage that. So I think when it comes to the scholarship, the way scholarships are designed, we need to help schools and universities in the continent and make sure, even if they're given scholarships, if these students want to have a scholarship, they can also go to the best schools within the African continent, while they still can maintain a good education system, just like any other universities that locates in the US or the UK or Canada. So making sure that, we are helping those universities to have the best technologies, to have best professors, and could also be one of the ways that we can retain students who are living from the continent to elsewhere, because there's already a good education system in the continent. But of course that will take time, but I think it should be some of the things that MasterCard also is looking forward to do it in the future. And Ibrahim, I think you wanted to say something.
No, I just wanted to kind of clarify, and I know I'm gonna maybe make people not feel nice, but at this particular point, really dissect, like academia is just on its own, write papers there, and then politicians, like what we do, they're like two different margins. The best thing And I am going back to the participatory approach that you are talking about. People in the rural areas, people in the margins of society are doing things whether the government is helping them or not. Definitely the social services could still be worse. And I also feel that we should start thinking from the same. So like my trajectory, a feedback back to my community. And now I'm just like starting to focus on mental health, right? Mental health is something which we not talked about. But also once you start digging into mental health, then you understand that there are problems which are dealing within the questions of understanding the history, the nuances of history, which Alice talked about. So most of the times is what do you need to do? What is available to you in your community? What are some of the skills that you have? Where can you help? Are you denying yourself not to be part of the world? And mostly the research which has really been there, even when we see I think the Mastercard Foundation, they found out that people just either want to study or they don't want to move out of the continent, or they just want to still do that. That is why when we're beginning this, I was saying that, of course, there is economic perspectives of economic brain drain, and then there is the political perspective. But most of the brain drain that we're talking about is actually in the modalities of rural-urban migration. It is in the modalities of moving from one African country to another. The most brain drain that you're talking about, look at the countries which are affected, is just affected by conflict. So people sometimes have a hope of return, so we have to understand those nuances and start getting clear on how we can be able to address them. And we have a very good concept of Ubuntu, which is a very good aspect because of working towards community. If we were to bring about that, I think we'll be able to revive that. The Ghanaians have a concept of Sankofa, which is to go back and retrieve what was needed. To go back in the past and retrieve what is needed to ensure a great future generation. In us, within our own skills, that we can be able to leverage, because the world is changing so much, and it's changing from the academia, the classroom, to mostly people skills.
People skills.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you so much. And also someone else asked if I'm coming back home. Of course, that's where my heart is, and I'm coming back to my country, but also to my continent, because if I want to leave a legacy, I want to stay my continent and make sure I contribute to the betterment of my continent, not only my country, but my whole continent. So wherever I stay, I like to stay within the continent in the future. Yeah, so thank you so much. I think this is at the end of the event. Thank you guys for coming, and thank you there's a whole discussion on the chat box, so thank you so much. And I would like to thank to Ibrahim, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you have done. Even though you were tired, you were committed to come, and that shows the talent within you. So thank you so much.
We're breaking bounds on Baobab.